Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome all of you that are watching online. Thank you for joining in once again. Once again, we're going to be here in the fifth series, or the fifth unit of the junior high series, and it's the responsibility unit. Hopefully everyone has downloaded this book. That's free. You can download the book for free. It's a teacher's manual. There on Facebook, there's a drop-down menu for this book. And I know there's a lot of people been asking recently, is it available in Spanish? This book is not available in Spanish, and is currently in line to be translated. The respect unit at this time is being translated into Spanish because that comes before this unit. But when you're asking about these units, it's very important, and I encourage everyone, if you haven't started with these units and you're looking for them in another language, the character unit is the first one you want. You don't want the responsibility unit first, or the respect or self-control or acceptance. You really need the character unit first, because that's the unit that lays the foundation. That's the very first unit that you'll always use to build off. These other four units will build off of those. And without the character unit, which we're going to go back to the character unit a lot tonight just to see how we've already went through a lot of these things, but now we're tying it all together. And without the things that we heard in the character unit, these things would not be as important. And they should be pulling things back into our minds, reinforcing what we've already learned, creating something that's more of a concrete substance instead of a sand substance, or out here in Texas, when the road seems so hard until it rains, and then your foot can sink 1.5 or 2 foot down into the road. And, that's not something of quality. Well, what we're building on is something of quality. We want something that's going to sustain us. It's easy to make decisions when life seems to be going great, but life doesn't always go that way. There's always some ups and downs, and as we said, curveballs and pitfalls that's going to take place. And those are things we have to prepare our minds for, and we have to be ready to deal with these situations, because there's going to be other people involved that will have a different mindset, a different type of education. As we've talked about, not everyone is practicing or learning the peaceful solution. Not everyone is even wanting to learn the peaceful solution or how to have a peaceful solution. You hear it said a lot by world leaders. We need a peaceful solution in Gaza or Ukraine or Sudan. We need a peaceful solution in Venezuela and Guyana. We need one here. We need one there. But you never hear one. It's always based around the gain of money. And that's what solutions tend to be involved in our world today, our society today. Everything is based on money and not care, consideration, and concern. True respect, having compassion, having true empathy for our fellow man or fellow woman. One thing we have to learn, and we are learning this in the state of Texas, people are not defined by borders. Value of a human being is not defined by a border. I'm not saying that borders should not be respected. We teach in the Peaceful Solution, all boundaries should be respected. To say the borders of the United States or any other country should not be respected is to equally say that your own house where you live and the property you live, people should come and go on it as much as they want. No, that shouldn't take place. There's rights of ownership to everything. And that's what we're going to go back into tonight, picking up where William left off, going back just a little bit to rehearse some, to get our minds set, because even with Noah's okay, it's based on ownership. You don't have a right to say yes or no unless you own something or have authority over it. There's no way you can give a yes or you can give a no unless you have the right to do so. Now, we govern ourselves, we belong to ourselves, but in this situation, we're talking about I have a responsibility to myself, and we're getting into the adolescence and learning what it's like to, of course, growing into the adulthood, still having our parents watch over us. Do children actually consider that they have an owner? Someone owns them. And we'll get into that much more deeper once we get into the next unit, which is the Building More Excellence unit. So I don't want to go too far into it. But obviously, as we spoke in this presentations before, whenever a child is taken from its rightful guardian, it's called kidnapping. Someone stole someone's child. So therefore, that child belongs to someone. So keep that in mind, and be turning back over to page 43. Page 43. We're just going to cover a couple bullet points, and then we're going to move forward and getting back into no is okay. But it's very important to understand that you have to have permission, or you have to have an authority, some kind of ownership, some kind of ability to say no. You know, if let's say there's a parent sitting right here in front of me, and let's say if his child asks him if she can go somewhere, if he can go somewhere, and I look at the child and go, no. How much sense does that make? Who do you go to ask permission to do something if you're a child? You go to your guardian, your parent, whether it's your mom, your dad, your grandmother, your grandfather, or your guardian, whether you're adopted. You go to the one who has responsibility for you. And that's who you ask. You don't go to someone else, but that's very common. We won't get into that tonight too much. It's very common for people to go to the ones they think will give them the answer they want. And if they don't get the answer they want, who else is next? There's somebody. Let me go ask them. And they'll keep going until they finally get the answer they want. And they can hear 500 no's, but it's the one yes they finally get. It's like, no, I got permission after 500 no's. Well, here on page 43, once again, we need to get set in our mind adolescence and what it is. And, of course, William covered all of these, and I encourage everyone to go back to watch the last two classes because of the detail involved in it, because we're just going to briefly cover over a few things just to build into the class tonight. At the very top of the page, it says, adolescence is that time period between childhood and adulthood that can be frustrating and wonderful all at the same time. You know, that's where you're finally leaving, even going to school. I remember that was a big deal for us. When we were in school, and elementary school for me in North Carolina, in grades 1 through 6, you were in homeroom all day. Every class you had was in that one room, unless you had PE, which is physical education. Then you got to go to the gymnasium. Other than that, you were in that classroom for everything but lunch. You got to go to lunch. That was it. You were there the whole day. And then when we went to the 7th and 8th grade, we had 7 class periods. And man, you felt like you were free just for the fact when the bell rang, you got to get up and walk out of that class after an hour. And you trotted on down to the next one. The only thing where I went to middle school is you didn't get lockers. So you had to carry every one of your books for the whole day with you in a huge book bag. And that became frustrating. And then when we got to high school, we had 6 classes and we got lockers. And that was even nice. The only problem was it seemed like all of my classes were on the east side and my locker was on the west side. And it was a huge school. So we figured out through there that you could get with your buddies and your friends and you could put a book in every locker. You just had to remember which locker your book was in that you needed. Otherwise, you were chasing it down. But that felt like a lot of freedom to be able to just go from one class to the next, And that was literally the only thing we had that was different, but it felt like a lot of freedom. It even felt strange if someone trusted you to go from one class to the next because you were so used to being isolated in one room. Well, continuing on here, you see with the teens, many teens complain of feeling as if they are being pulled in opposite directions. On one hand, they're told to act like adults. On the other hand, for their own safety and well-being, they must still be treated like a child. You know, and that is not a negative thing. It's not degrading, and you don't see that until you're older. And sadly, I think it's most difficult to see I'll speak from my perspective, because that's the only perspective I can really speak from. I didn't see it clearly until I had children that started going through those times in their life, where now they want to do things, they want to do this, they want to do that, and you don't really want to allow them to be able to just run and go. You don't want them to be able to just go do anything they want to do. Just for the fact, and this is a very important part as a parent, because we usually think about the things we did when we were that age. And then we start making decisions for our children based on the ideology that they're going to do the exact same thing we did. They're going to find somebody, go race cars down the road 100 plus mile an hour. They're going to do this, they're going to do this and that. And that's not really the case. And it's really, we really got to be careful we don't start determining decisions based on our bad choices for our children, even though we can learn to make better choices and teach them to avoid those to help the thought not even come into their mind. But continuing on, it says, this is one of those ironic aspects of being adolescents. Although you might not be old enough to be totally independent and make all of your own decisions, you are old enough to be responsible for the decisions you do make and to face the consequences or rewards. And that's very important. Looking down to just below a cold hard fact, note that it says that nothing positive can come from engaging in risky behavior. Those who experiment with drugs or overindulging in alcohol to get high always end up feeling low. And one thing to remember, when you're a child or a young adult, you can't even legally be partaking of alcohol. In the United States, it's mostly 21 years of age. So that's something that everyone should adhere to, are these rules that are given for our safety. And at the very bottom here, you see it says, don't risk your health, safety, and future just to try something new and be part of the in crowd. Everybody wants to be, this is what everybody else is doing. That's what I want to do too. Because once you start getting older, you start going out with your friends more, you start seeing things that they get to do. And not everybody is being raised in a house, as we'll cover here some more tonight, that is taught to adhere to rules. Looking over to page 44, you see no is okay. And just to read the very top part, it says, in addition to being accountable for your actions, and that's something that comes with growing up, and everybody that's listening that is a teenager has to start recognizing you're going to be held responsible for what you do. It's time to not go to mom and say, hey, my clothes are dirty. It's time for you to start getting your clothes and putting them in the washing machine yourself. I've always thought it's amazing when somebody thinks they can drive a car, but they can't operate a washing machine. That's not convincing me that someone can drive a car. Or they can change the oil, but they can't wash the dishes. You got to put forth something that will convince your parents or your guardian that, hey, I am responsible enough to do this, because it's part of it. Even cleaning the house or participating in cleaning your own school. It's very important because we're responsible for, remember, a positive society is a group of people that adhere to rules. And if the rules are there and they're ignored, no, the rules are not harsh. The rules are not set for punishment. If we start saying that rules are set for punishment and we tell young adults that means that when they come to a stop sign, that's punishment because that's a rule. No, rules, whether it's clean the bathroom or stop at the stop sign, they're all there to keep us safe. And if you think cleaning the bathroom doesn't keep you safe, you haven't researched how viruses spread enough. You'll learn very quickly that is one of the most common ways they spread. Spread to people that's not even in your school or in your bathroom. You can spread them throughout your whole community because of your lack of sanitization. But continuing on here, it says, by having the right attitude, you can give them an opportunity to help you make positive decisions. So once again, by having the right attitude, well, how do you get the right attitude? Where does the right attitude come from? Well, remember, a parent is also a leader. That's one thing that we have to be as parents or guardians. You have to be leaders. If you're not the leader of your household, I had a great teacher that I knew. I studied with him for years. And he gave a speech one time called Be the Head, Not the Tail. And it was how to actually be a proper parent, comparing it to leadership and how you actually do it. And there was a lot to be learned into that speech that he gave. And that was many years ago. But I still have my notebook where I wrote my notes down, and I still have all of my notes to everything I learned in that speech. And that was it's been years, but it was a very powerful speech. Looking down here, just below the critical thinking, where you have the lines where you would have gave your answers, in the section where it starts off, do you know what the whole purpose of being taught is? And what are we taught? Well, of course, we're taught rules. Remember, the rules keep us safe. We're taught how to do things. And when we're taught how to do things, when we're taught the proper procedures, we're being taught the guidelines, the rules, these things that will allow us to have success. And notice it says, so that you can gain knowledge, grow up, become a successful adult, and contribute to society. What is a society? Remember the ripple effect in the character unit, chapter 5. A positive society is governed by a body of rules. And the rules are not there to punish us, they're there to keep us safe. How can a child, a young adult, someone going through adolescence, how can they adhere to the rules if the rules are not supposed to be important? And could you imagine if you put into the mind of a child that, well, to make you adhere to the rules, that's being harsh. Well, you don't have to make someone adhere to the rules if you teach them the benefits of them. They'll choose to keep the rules. And that's the benefit of actually having education. If we could go to our first slide, I want to remind everyone of what we went through. This is out of the character unit on page 130. And it's talking about a potential leader won't mind being trained. Well, that's like saying a potential child won't mind being a parent, because we're actually training our children to be parents themselves. Whether they become parents at an early age or they wait later on in life, whether they adopt children, whether they become teachers to other people's children, that leadership has to be grown. It has to be molded. It has to be shaped. And notice it says, not a born leader, join the crowd. Most people aren't either, but don't let that discourage you from learning how to lead. There are many things we are not born knowing how to do, such as reading, writing, or even riding a bike. Learning these skills might be difficult at first, but you not only learn how to do them, you learn how to do them well. How do you learn how to do them? You need a teacher, and you have to get this certain mindset that we're going to see here. It says, leading others requires character, personality, and skills, but to be the very best, you must develop a positive character and a harmless, helpful personality. You already know that you must maintain and develop a positive character on a daily basis. As for skills, well, you can learn the skills relevant to leadership in the same way you learned all of your other skills. You practice, practice, practice. So if developing a positive character requires practice, 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 how much can you affect your child or students or anyone you're responsible for if you hold them back from the rules, if you hold them back from the actual practicing of doing what is right? Whenever the rules are the adversary, that's teaching a very negative, that's a negative part of society we're participating in. You know, well, if somebody tells you you have to do that, that's just force. Well, you know, that's, once again, simplify it down to a stop sign. Yes, you have to stop. And if you don't stop, yes, law enforcement is going to make you stop. Or they're going to take your license where you can't drive anymore. And that's one thing to remember. If you are someone that looks at the rules as being harsh, the rules are something that is just too much, then you don't deserve the right to participate in whatever those rules govern. If you don't want to stop at stoplights or stop signs or yield signs, you don't want to slow down, you lose the right to drive. If you don't like signs of speed limits, which I tell you, living in the state of Texas, I know there's some places in Montana and up in that area of the United States where you have the Autobahn, you go as fast as you want to. I know there's some places in Mexico that are the same way, because you drive for 2 hours and you see nothing and you just put it on cruise control at 100 miles an hour because there's really not a speed limit on the road. But in the state of Texas, it's usually 75. There's some parts where it's 85. But you get into other countries, 30 mile an hour is the fastest you're going to go. And if you even think about going 40, you're going to go to jail. And it's very different. But you see in some places, if you were to try to do that, you would start having a lot of accidents. Because there's some places you go to and you can go online, and it's important to show your students this. Can you drive without stop signs? You sure can. I've been to countries that they don't use stop signs. I think street signs are decorations. No one goes by them. And then some places, they just don't have them. But when they drive, everybody's looking at the other driver. They're all looking at each other. And I've noticed the United States is the only place you can drive and see people doing this. In other countries, oh, you'd have wrecks everywhere because they don't have stop signs. And you can go on YouTube and see India, the country of India, their intersections. It's like organized chaos, and everybody gets through. And they say they very seldom have wrecks. Well, think about this because these rules are important. If we could go to the next slide, looking at a leader, comparing a leader with a parent or a guardian. You know, on page 131 and 132, we had some pointers of how we can become positive leaders. And number 3 was positive leaders are responsible for their actions. The characteristic of being responsible is a combination of following through on your task and being responsible for your actions. It also includes not blaming others for your mistakes, but learning from them. So I'm going to simplify this about having the characteristics of following through with the task of being responsible. I'm going to simplify this as simple as going to the bathroom. When you go to the bathroom, who wants to go to a clean bathroom? I think everyone does. But you know, you'll find out that some young people don't mind leaving the bathroom much nastier than what it was when they went to it. And the only way to change that is to train them. Even if you have to post rules on the wall. And that's one thing the Peaceful Solution has, where you can actually get these rules and post them on the wall. And if you are not willing to teach someone how to keep the bathroom clean, then you have to be willing to go in and clean up the bad choices. I'm not going to say mistakes because it's not a mistake. It's a bad choice. And you have to be able to live with the filth that's going to come from that. And that's breaking it down on a child's level to where you have to understand that these things have to be done. And if they're not done, you're going to have to live with the consequences. And I'm speaking to the parents, the teachers, the guardians. Those are the ones that are responsible for whether the students or the ones that they're responsible for get trained. And if you let your students or your children go through life and you don't expose them to the proper procedures and the right way to do things, you're the one that has been irresponsible. And they're only the product of your irresponsibility. But looking over to page 45, this is the page that William, he left off on, and we're going to read that first full paragraph, and then we're going to get into where he left off. But notice it says, page 45, being responsible to yourself means being able to consider the viewpoints of those who care for and are in charge of you. So those who care for and are in charge of you. So that could be an adult that has been put over you, a trusted authority, a school teacher, a guidance counselor, your parents. That could include a lot of people. What you might interpret as your parents' guardians raining on your parade, I've also heard it defined other ways, is instead their love for you and their concern for your health and safety. Seeing another person's viewpoint requires self-control. You have to stop, think, and then put yourself in their shoes. You got to have empathy. Remember, that was one of the most important things we've talked about in the character unit, especially going through pages 117 and 118, where we talked about having hope. And we have to understand not everybody's in the same situation. There's many people watching this class outside of the United States that live very different lives than those of us here. You know, I recently was talking to some adults in a country that has a very bad economy. And I asked them, I said, what is success for you in your job? Because I was trying to figure out how we could help the children of their community. And, you know, in the United States, the American dream is to have a, house, a car, a nice job. And everyone in that group answered, we work to make sure we eat next week. So, well, what more do you find? That's it. Because there's many weeks we work and we don't get to eat every day. And that's reality. And of course, eating for them is having eggs and rice. That's eating. That's success. And I watched, here in the United States, this will give you an idea, because we're talking about what parents go through that have to raise their children. We have long roads, grass gets high, and you see these huge tractors come out. And they mow down the grass, they'll clean it out. People that have committed criminal violations, they put them on community service. They have to go up and pick out the trash and everything. And then they'll take these big tractors and mow the grass down. I've seen countries to where they'll have 50 men out there with weed eaters, and that's the only way they do it. There's no big tractors. There's no farm equipment. There's nobody picking up the trash for you. You're out there 12 hours a day with a weed eater. The only thing I've seen is, I don't know what weed eater they use, but I would like to buy one that they're using, because obviously they run those things hard. But I watched, and I finally, I couldn't, there's so many of them, I had to stop and talk to one. Because in some countries, just stopping and talking is not a problem. They'll sleep on the side of the road just for siesta. And I asked, I said, so what does a job like this pay? And he was tickled. He goes, he told me in pesos, but it was $55 a week, working 12 hours a day. And I thought, wow. And this guy's joyful. He's pleased. You know why? He gets to eat every day. That's all he asks for. That's it. Nothing else. No car, no motorcycle, nothing. Just get to eat. That's it. Where do you live? I live with my family. We all live in one house. We can't afford to have our own houses. That's one of the things that Americans expect that other countries don't even think of. Everybody lives in one house, because it's not possible. Well, think about that, because this sometimes American ideology that we get, that only the parents can correct the children. In other countries, as Japan, the author used to quote what takes place in Japan, it takes a village to raise a child. And in other countries, you have grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, they're all living in the same house. And who do you think corrects the child when the child does something wrong? It's whatever authority is there, because everyone's stuck in the same house. Well, continuing on here, to the paragraph that says most parents and guardians, it's right below the picture of the woman. This is where William left off. Most parents, guardians take their jobs of parenting very seriously. And you can underline that word most, because it's not all. Some don't care, and that's a sad fact. Some parents use their children for government money, using them to manipulate, using them to walk down the streets looking for people to get money for their child and acting like they have nothing. I can tell you, I have seen children. In the last 2 years, I have seen people use children to make money for everything. And didn't do the things they said they would do, they just stole money. But most parents or guardians will take their job seriously. All of them should, but most do. You're not going to find a lot. You're going to find some in every situation that don't. They want to protect their children from harm and danger. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rules. There are some parents, guardians, who are negligent and abusive and do not give proper guidance to their children. Proper guidance to their children. What is proper guidance? It's oversight. It's making sure that after you've taught them the proper way to do something, that they are starting to implement it into their life. If we could put up the next slide. We went over this before. The next slide. We went over on page 73 of your character unit. We went over what it means to become a very important person. And we had to value, imitate, practice. And we just read how you learn to do these things are through practice, practice, practice. And of course, here on page 73 of the character unit, in the section entitled Practice, it says, make moral choices and practice beneficial behaviors that will build your character. Remember, we have to build it. You're not born with a positive character. It's something we have to form, we have to shape, and we have to solidify it. We have to actually firm it up within inside of us in our hearts and minds to make decisions that will help us not to bring harm to anyone else. It says consistently practicing a right behavior makes it a habit. Well, we're not born knowing what the right behavior is. We need a teacher, a guide, someone that will instruct us, someone that cares enough to tell us that the rules are there to help us and not that the rules are there to just be harsh on us. For example, by practicing being honest, you will become known as an honest person whom others can trust. And I take it all the way back into using a bathroom. I don't know anyone that likes to go into a bathroom and use a bathroom that is just completely unsanitary. Well, if you want people to learn to keep the bathroom sanitary, you're going to have to teach them. And if you've ever potty trained a child, you know that it's not just a one-time thing. I have been involved with a certain school that children have invented things I didn't know was possible to do in the bathrooms to make them nastier. And you wonder, where in the world did these little minds come up with this stuff? And then sometimes it's like, how did he get up there to do that? And, your mind starts wondering, how is this even possible? And then you realize, well, I probably don't want to know. Let's just start back from the beginning. Because sometimes you'll find out in schools, the teachers have to potty train the children. I don't mean go in there and sit with them, but they have to teach them how to do it properly because the parents didn't care enough to. The parents thought one time was enough, and it's not. You don't teach your child to read in one night, how to write in one day, and you don't teach them proper hygiene and other proper procedures to do things in one sitting. It takes time to do these things. But continuing on here, that we have some people that are negligent. They don't want to teach the rules. They make the rules look like they're harsh. The rules are just there they're just there to ruin your day. And then whenever we tell someone, imagine telling someone, this is the rule, but I won't force you to keep that rule. You're automatically putting into their mind that rule is negative because it's going to require some. That's like saying, I won't, you can break the rule freely and I won't say a thing. It's like breaking the rule is easier to do. And, they always say stolen sugar is sweeter. The only problem is the repercussions that come with the stolen sugar. It might taste sweeter, but it won't get you very far. And that's the part that's left out. That's the part to where the rules seem harsh. They need to finish that with, but if you don't keep them, you're going to suffer a consequence. And that's just a sad fact of life. Continuing on, it says, overall, parents and guardians are really not trying to cramp your style, keep you from growing up or from having fun. One thing to remember is all parents were once children and teenagers. That tends to go out of the mind of a child. They're just trying to teach and protect you so that someday when you become an adult and can make all of your own decisions, you'll be able to make the right ones. And you'll still make some bad choices and some mistakes because of lack of education. Even though you try to teach your children everything you can. And this is a very important part of being a parent. If you think that you're the only one that can teach your child, you are holding your child back from so much. If you are a parent, you should get your child involved in classes with people who are outside your family. Get them involved with guidance counselors. Let the guidance counselors talk to them. Because, there's some things that you'll have a child that wants to talk about. They feel more comfortable talking to a guidance counselor. And the best advice I can give any parent when your child has guidance counselors is stay out of it. Let the children be able to have their counseling, talk to someone, because the problem could be between you and them. And it's not very fair to not let the child be able to express themselves in a way that a peaceful solution can be resolved. And I'm not saying let your child go off and do what they want to do, but you should be able to see the benefit in these things and let these things grow. And you'll find out that these things actually make parenting much easier when you involve, extracurricular activity. And people can say, my child went to school for 6 hours. They're not interested in a class. If you've ever tried it, if you ever tried to offer it, I know of children that in the Peaceful Solution that have traveled all over the United States just because they came to class. They were given the opportunity to literally travel places that I never went until I started going with these children on trips. You know, I've never been anywhere outside the United States unless it was involved with the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. But being involved in this program, I've been on close to 30 international trips in the last 4 years. This has allowed me to see and learn things I would have never learned without being involved in this program. Wouldn't even have thought about it. But I tell you, it's something that the author of The Peaceful Solution once told me, and I encourage everyone to do this. If you're not traveling, if you can't afford to travel, we have a system, called the computer. And instead of using it for things that are not, beneficial, we used to write pen pal letters when I was in school. And we would send those pen pal letters, we'd send them to London. That's where we did. And we always couldn't wait to get one back. And I remember in the 6th grade, my teacher asked me, who would you like to write a letter to? And there was something I disagreed with in school, so I wanted to write it to the Board of Education of North Carolina. And I was kind of shocked when they sent back a response. Because here's a 6th grader that's just complaining. But they explain things very well. But get to know other situations. I just met a man Friday from Sudan. And all I wanted to know was, what is Sudan really like? Is it really what I see on TV? And he told me, he said, it's what you see on TV does not come anywhere close to describing how bad it is. He goes, over there, they hack you to death. They're very harsh. He goes, you're not going to see that on your TV over here. And I've been to countries to where, death is very real. Children dying constantly. I've been to cities where 6 and 7-year-olds are committing suicide every week. 6 and 7-year-olds. What do you think the parents are missing with these children? And I'm just trying to put this in the mind because we have to understand it takes more, as the author, I couldn't say it better, so I'll just repeat what he said again. It takes a village to raise a child. If your child is doing something inappropriate and somebody corrects your child, and if you get mad at the person that corrected your child, you need to go to parenting classes. You need to go to a class that will help you to be able to help your child. Because you're holding your child back and you're leading your child into a very destructive way of life. So when Noah's okay, it's not, don't correct my child. If he wants to slam his hand in the door, he has the right to. Okay, well, when he slams his hand in the door, you can live with the consequences, I guess. And then some parents will be, well, he's got to learn. Well, you do have to learn. We all have to learn, but a loving parent will teach you how not to slam your hand in the door. A parent that don't care will just let you slam away. That's the fine line between having a positive outlook and a negative outlook. But continuing on here, once again, they're just trying to teach and protect you so that someday when you become an adult, you can make all of your own decisions. You'll be able to make the right ones. So the next time you ask to stay out late or to go to someone's house who your parents or guardians do not know and they say no, don't get upset. Once again, why can my parents tell me no? They own you. Whether you know it or not, they own you. If you don't know they own you, go look at their income tax returns. You're on there as a dependent. You depend on them. Without them, even the government says they own you. When you get 18, I've always been amazed that there's something about the age of 18. I didn't experience it when I was 18. I guess I didn't. But there's like someone sprinkles pixie dust on someone's head and now they're all knowledgeable at 18. And it takes place on the day they turned 18. When I turned 18, I realized I was just as ignorant as I was when I was 17. So I don't know where this pixie dust comes from because it didn't affect me. It didn't help me. Maybe I just needed more than what I had. But some people think that, I become an adult at 18. That's what the laws of the United States say. that just means you're held accountable as an adult. It doesn't mean you have the knowledge of an adult. Doesn't mean you have the responsibility taught or within you to act as an adult. It just means if you do something wrong, you're going to be charged as an adult. And they miss the whole concept. It doesn't mean you're an adult. It means you're going to be recognized and charged as an adult. That's what it actually means. Doesn't mean you've come to a certain point. It means you're expected to adhere to a certain point. So there's a lot of education that's expected to be within your mind. So continuing on, it says, and the next time you want to attend an activity, once again, that your parents, guardians offer to chaperone, don't get upset. Instead, be glad and appreciate that you have parents or guardians who care enough about you to take an interest in your life. Just remember that although the word no can be disappointing, no is okay, especially when it's coming from those who are in charge of you and protecting you so that you can grow to be healthy in mind and body. And you remember William left off with talking about slumber parties and the things that take place at these slumber parties and all of these other situations that were allowed as we were growing up. And one thing that children are always looking for are opportunities. Children are very opportunistic. They like opportunities. And as a parent, you can reduce their risk-taking behavior just by reducing the opportunities that you set before them. When I was listening to his class, I thought, I never had sisters, so I didn't have slumber parties. I just had two brothers. So we never had slumber parties, but I had friends that I heard say the very same thing that William was saying in his class. They said the very same thing. And, but having parents, our parents didn't allow people to sleep over. So I never had a friend that slept over. That was just a rule that my parents had when we were growing up. They didn't allow that, so we didn't do it. So it's not that if I would have had a sister and they would allow them to come over, that's opportunities that are put before people. And it just depends on, the environment you grow up in. It's really there. If you don't have sisters, it kind of reduces that. If you do have sisters, it kind of opens the door. Some parents are very strict. Some parents are not very strict. And sometimes just depending on where you're raised and the era you were raised in, that has a lot to do with how things even go. But here at the bottom of the page, notice this warning. Do not avoid asking permission because you might be told no. Making certain decisions on your own can have serious consequences. They can have very serious consequences. Going to the next slide, and this is page 85 of the character unit. Notice here it says maintaining your character will sometimes require courage. Maintaining, that means you're building it up and you're keeping it in the working condition it's supposed to be in. So maintaining means you're training, you're working, you're trying, you're educating yourself, someone's teaching you the rules, and you're trying to adhere to the rules. So having knowledge, that's someone's taught you, you've gained something there. Wisdom, that means you're applying what you've learned. It's very important to remember that wisdom is the application of knowledge. So having knowledge, wisdom, and a plan will give you the confidence you need to stand your ground. So that's what we're actually doing when we teach children, young adults. We're giving them the knowledge and the wisdom and the confidence, the courage, the determination to do what is right. So notice, don't be discouraged if you find yourself in a situation where you are the only one trying to do what is right. Remember, you must stand up for what is right or you will fall for anything. So be prepared by making full use of what you have learned. Notice full use, that means complete, total, of what you've learned in the Peaceful Solution Character Education classes. Preparation will enable you to avoid the curveballs and pitfalls of life. And notice bad choices lead to bad consequences. Both of those go hand in hand. Then looking over to page 46, and we're still continuing on in Procedure 3. That's what William started in, and we're still in Procedure 3. So we're going to keep going on to what if I live in a family that is abusive? What if I live in a family that is abusive? If we could put up the next slide. In Character Unit, Chapter 2, we studied the effects of character within the family. We went through a lot of detail of about what a family life is and the ups and the downs of family life. And, you know, I would always encourage everyone, where you have this title up here, What If I Live in a Family That Is Abusive? Write chapter 2 of the character unit to remind yourself. There's a whole chapter there you have to pull information from when teaching these classes. And of course, chapter 2, and it says the effects of character within the family. And this was the introduction. It said in the last chapter, speaking of the character unit, you learn that through the process of genetics and some of your behavioral traits are inherited from your parents. You also learn that your values, what you consider as important, begins with what you have been taught. If your parents don't value the rules, what do you think the child's going to do? Or not going to do? They're not going to value the rules. They're not going to be important. You know, there's nothing worse than a parent saying, you can't force my child to clean that bathroom. Well, then he can't use the bathroom. How does that work? You know, if he's not going to clean it, he can't use it. There's rules to it. I don't think he's going to want to hold it all day. And there's some people that they make it sound like, well, you're just being so hard on that child. Well, you know, it's unless you want to use a bathroom that changes colors throughout the day, I don't know anybody else that does. You know, it's disgusting. There's so many diseases. Take time, teachers. Take time going through a class with your students showing how much disease is spread just by not keeping a bathroom sanitary. I know of one school that I've seen where students were the first ones to get sick out of a whole community. And it was like common. So we had a biologist, a microbiologist one time, and we thought, we're going to swab this place. We're going to check and see what we find. And once again, this man went to college to be a microbiologist. He knew what he was doing. He was a microbiologist. And he called me after they swabbed, and I know William was there, David was there. And he said, you're not going to believe what I found everywhere. And at the time, I'm like, I have no idea what. Found fecal matter, poop. Like, where? Every doorknob, on the desk, on the keyboards, on the headphones. Where else? On the ink pens on the teacher's desk, you know, the ones you stick against your lip and you pop in and out constantly. You know, where else? On the silverware. You mean what they're eating with? Yeah. How did it get there? The bathroom. They're not wiping the bathroom down or washing their hands properly. And the sad part about it is, the rules in that school was once you use the toilet, you're to spray it with the water that's provided and wipe it down and clean it and leave it just as clean for the next person as you found it for yourself. Now, that finally, through a lot of process, got to where it became operable. That standard, once you get it there, you have to maintain it. That's what we just read about maintaining things. And I've been in other schools where, you know, the teacher works very hard to try to get these things through. I know it's a challenge for him, but he doesn't give up and he works extremely hard to get it done. But once again, it begins with what you value. And I cannot stress enough, these rules must be kept. They must be taught as something that is beneficial, something that is helpful, something that is just as great as giving your driver's license or being able to do what you want to do, you know, as long as you do it within the rules. Continuing on the slide here, it says your parents and your environment, as well as other siblings and family members, play a major role in what you value and the development of your character. It has been stated that all forms of parental interaction, verbal, physical, or otherwise, assist in all forms of the interaction. Verbal, physical, or otherwise, assist in reinforcing the children's value and behavior. The role of parents and the family in shaping a positive, The role of parents and the family in shaping a positive or negative character cannot be overstated. Remember, we said the same thing about influences, how we should not ever underestimate the power of an influence. The same thing here with what the parents do or don't do. And the activities, the involvement cannot be overstated. And of course, for your notes here, in this chapter, you will learn that character plays a key role in families. Negative or positive character has the ability to destroy a family or strengthen and build the family unit. And of course, once again, we're looking at what if I live in a family that is abusive? Well, going back here to page 46, notice it says, when families do not function in a healthy way, they are called dysfunctional. In a dysfunctional family, there might be verbal, physical, or even sexual abuse. There might also be alcohol and drug abuse. And these are situations that when someone is involved in one of these situations, they need to seek help. And that means if you're involved where someone is if you're being verbally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, that's what guidance counselors are for. That gives you the option, the door to get out and do things. But I also know that sadly, we live in a society where there's many sick people, mentally insane, pretty much. And I know of people that have actually been accused of molesting their children. Actually accused of doing negative things that they never did. Everyone in the community knows they never did it. And the sad part about that is when someone accuses you of that, that's when you take legal action. Because you can actually sue someone for that. Especially when that person is known throughout the world as someone that participates in something that teaches character education. So if you ever do someone that way, be prepared to be sued. Because as sure as the sun comes up in the morning, the lawsuit will come in the mail or from the constable. It's very important that we never, ever put something in the mind of somebody that somebody has done something wrong if they haven't done it. And if they have done it, we should seek help for them. We should really try to help them. But can you imagine? I have a friend that was accused of something he didn't do, and he's been paying for 16 years now. And it's well known that he didn't do it. Even from the person that accused him, they admit that he didn't do it. But that doesn't change anything in his life. We should never be anyone that participates in putting that in someone else's. So if a parent doesn't seem to be the right kind of parent in your eyes, talk to the parent about how you can help. Don't start spreading about how they're a bad parent. That child lets their child, do this or do that. Well, try to help the parent, because telling the child how bad the parent is isn't going to help the child. That's going to turn the child against the parent, and that's going to make it even harder to deal with. But of course, take all of these things in. We have to be, it's called liability, and we have to be, there's guidelines and rules in society that we have to live within. Continuing on here, it says, if you or someone you know is living in an abusive home, then seek help from a trusted adult immediately. And that's it. And we've had this take place with children. We were actually teaching the second chapter of the character unit in Houston, Texas, when we were teaching a class, and a young lady raised her hand in the class, and she raised her hand and she told the whole class she was being sexually abused. She never told anybody. The teacher immediately stopped the class, got the guidance counselor, sent the child out the door. And then the teacher didn't want to teach this program anymore. He goes, I don't get paid to deal with this stuff. That program brought this out in that child. And I thought, that's a positive thing. That's not a negative thing. Now, it shouldn't have been brought out where everybody in the classroom heard it. That shouldn't have took place. But it should be brought out. This child should feel compelled to be able to talk to someone, get help. And so sadly, there's some people that they just don't want to help others. They want to sweep it underneath the rug, and you can't do that. Notice here it says, encourage your friends to seek help. Do not keep physical, verbal, or sexual abuse a secret. Let someone know who can help you. And that's something that we should encourage everyone to do. Never, ever, ever try to keep someone from getting help. In a dysfunctional family, normal, healthy interaction that should exist between children, parents, guardians is often strained or non-existent. Children find it difficult to have positive communication with their parents and might make many decisions on their own and without proper guidance. And that's something that, as a parent, you have to be able to give yourself an open door to have discussions with your children. A teacher has to have it with their classroom. A guidance counselor has to have it with the counselees. You have to have some form of communication. And remember, the interaction of communication and the positive ways in which we interact. Remember, one of the key things we have to do is listen. We have to listen to what the other person is saying. And when someone is going through something that's of this magnitude, they're looking for someone who will listen, someone who can help them. And you can only imagine if someone has been treated in this way, someone's going to have to listen quite a bit, because there's going to be a lot of things that person has within them that they need to get off their chest. And they're doing it so they can get help. They're not doing it so they can spread gossip. They're doing it so they can get help. And we should always make sure those doors are open to everyone. But continuing on, it says, sadly, the majority of preteens and teenagers who engage in risky behaviors come from these types of homes. Learning how to make responsible decisions is one way to stop the cycle of abuse. Regardless of what your circumstances are, you control what you think, your attitude, and how you behave. You only know that you can do that when you're taught that you can do that. Some people think that they can't do that because they're not taught that they have that ability. And that's one negative thing about teaching someone that the rules are not there to keep you safe, or the rules are harsh, is you're taking away their ability to be able to make decisions. Because if you want to make a positive decision, what's the first thing you consider? You have to consider the rules. And that's how you know what is right and what is wrong. When we go through stop, think, consider our options, and proceed, well, we got the stop down. We got the thinking down. You're only going to think about what you've been taught because that's the only knowledge you have. And then the options you're considering is, what are the rewards? What are the consequences? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? Will this hurt somebody or will this not hurt somebody? If we get the stop down and we don't have the knowledge put within our minds to think, your options aren't going to be very wide. They're going to be very narrow, and you're not going to be able to make a sound choice. You're going to proceed with whatever you came up with. Which, well, should I smoke dope? No, I'll smoke one. Okay, just one. Yeah. That's it. Just one. You should have enough knowledge to know, you shouldn't smoke any. Scientific studies that prove that it prohibits your learning ability. So after you smoke the first one, your learning ability to know you shouldn't do it diminishes greatly. Even if the state says it's okay to do it, doesn't make it okay to do it. I can think of a lot of things some of the state says okay to do. I would tell you it's not okay to do. It'll kill you. But we'll keep those for another time. Continuing on here, once again, learning to make responsible decisions is one way to stop the cycle of abuse. Learning to do that, getting the knowledge. Going to the next paragraph, it says, if you are in an abusive situation, it is normal to feel angry, scared, or alone. And remember, that's secondary emotion of anger. That's because you're going through other emotions too. So there's a lot of emotions that we know from what we've been educated in the self-control unit. When we see that it's normal to feel angry, there's a lot of other emotions going on with it. Disappointed, embarrassed, and a lot of other things going on there. It's not just anger, because that's secondary. So as a teacher, remind yourself and your students, it's really not as simple as what we're reading here. There's much more into it, to the point children are taking their lives. Think about what a person has to go through to take their own life. That's a lot of things going on, and the value has totally disappeared. But continuing on here, it says, however, without getting help from a caring adult, you can end up feeling resentment towards those who are abusive. Remember, you have a choice. You can choose to hold on to resentment and allow that resentment to turn to hate, hostility, or you can choose to commit yourself to developing positive character, getting an education, achieving positive goals, and acquiring skills and knowledge to make better decisions and someday provide a safe, healthy environment for your children. In other words, you find out how to break that cycle. You change it. And I've met people that have done so. I've met people that grew up in abusive situations to where the parents did very bad things to them, and they grew up to be really decent teachers. They've grown up to be great role models to other people. They've actually helped others make a difference in their life. And one thing about it is the people they're helping have no idea what they went through in their life. I only know because when you're a guidance counselor, you get involved in a lot of people's lives and you learn a lot of things about people. And you actually can see how people change their life drastically for the better because someone gave them the opportunity and gave them the education on how to do it. I know a lot of people. There's a lot of people sitting in this auditorium right now that they're some of the best teachers on the face of this earth. But 30 years ago, we probably were some of the worst people on the face of this earth. But through the teaching and learning of the character education program that we go through, and those watching online, we've learned how to do a lot of things. But it's through seeing this knowledge and accepting what we've been taught. We're going to stop right here. So we're going to pick back up here on the paragraph that says, for now, you can make responsible choices, because we're going to tie that into some more slides when we get to that. So our next class is going to be January 31st. That'll be this Wednesday at 5:30. We're going to pick back up on page 46, and we're going to tie back in some more things with chapter 2 of the character unit into how to build and make a change into this abusive family into a very successful family, but realizing that, remember the character unit when we talked about most families are a combination of positive and negative. Every family has something they need to work on. There's not one family that doesn't, but we can make our families better. We can make our classrooms better. That's what we're looking to do. Because when we say family, you can identify that as a school setting, whether it be a classroom, your home, other activities you're involved in, work environment. You know, a lot of those things all playing together, the same rules govern all of them. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll look back to join you again this coming Wednesday.